And I have been kind of re-looking at the text of the community energy plan, reading through those early pages where it lays out the parameters and expectations and framework from which to proceed. And I'm reading things that I think are significant to call to your attention, that I think will help shape your evaluation as you take a serious look at the community energy plan and trying to determine whether or not it's on track, where it could be improved and whatnot. But I'm looking just simply at the bottom of page 4, where it says the project work team was challenged to create a world-class energy plan for the city that goes far beyond incremental efficiency improvements. Implementation of this plan will achieve breakthrough levels of economic and environmental performance with high levels of reliability and quality. And I wanted to just pull out a couple words from what this document says I should be able to expect from a community energy plan, and particularly breakthrough levels of performance. And I would challenge you as you evaluate and continue to take testimony, are you hearing the sorts of things that tell you we're engaged in breakthrough performance? And in like manner, are we engaged in the kind of things that you could define and enumerate that would even represent incremental improvement? We're 10 years into this, but I'd like to see if we can answer those two questions based on what we have done to this point. And based on what those answers are, what do we think we need to do in order to be on a track that delivers breakthrough performance? So those are my comments. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, Peter.
Did I see Emily have her hand up for a second? There you are, Emily.
Yes, hello. My name is Emily Pratt and I'm at 53 South Division Street in Holland. First of all, thank you so much for the work that you guys are all doing. I want to take a moment today to remind you of the importance of your work. As a local farmer, my career and industry are directly affected by climate change. For others, it can be easy to dismiss the potential impacts of a 2-degree global increase in temperature. But for me, the 2-degree increase that scientists are always harping about would be truly detrimental. It affects my career and my well-being. I and other farmers have lost crops in recent seasons to early or late frosts or unexpected weeks of warmth. Small farming businesses like the ones I have worked for can be especially wounded by such unexpected losses due to change in climate. But there are actions we can take, actions you can take. By protecting the climate, you are protecting me, a local farmer, and countless other farmers like me. If Holland views it as its duty to provide a safe environment for its citizens, then lowering the city's carbon footprint is part of the duty of Holland. We must strive towards reducing our carbon footprint by 50% by 2030 and reaching carbon neutrality by 2050. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Emily.
Mm-hmm.
I want to ask you what you grow, but I'm not allowed to do Q&A with this part. The public rules are brutal. Thanks for farming. We appreciate it. Don, I see your hand, brother. But you're on mute. I'll give you 3 seconds. Otherwise, I'm going to Laura and then I'll come back to you. Oh, there you go.
All right. I'll say it again. Thank you, Brian. Indeed, the work you do so that our children's children hopefully might enjoy the same nature-rich life that we value so highly today. My name is Don Triesenberg and I live at 29 East 6th Street. Say, have you guys been following the news about the ship stuck sideways in the Suez Canal? I read it's about 4 football fields long. Boyd, if that ship parked itself lengthwise down 8th Street, it would stretch from your yogurt shop on down to Skiles Pizza. Hey, imagine this. If we put all 20,000 containers on that ship onto flatbed rail cars, we'd make a train 200 miles long. This ship I read is a 200,000 ton ship. You can probably see where I'm going with this. Guess what? Holland's 19 tons per person means collectively we emit 700,000 tons of climate changing gases into our air every year. Think of it this way, from the time your team started meeting a few months ago until the time that City Council eventually reads your report, well, we will have emitted 4 giant container ships worth of CO2. And here's the problem. All that CO2 doesn't go away. It just stays there. The only thing that takes CO2 back out of the air is a tree. That's the reason for buying carbon offsets, something you learned about at a previous meeting. So why not act now to start a community co-op, allowing everyone to buy RECs and offsets at the same low rates as companies like Steelcase do? But moving on, Tim, that ship stuck in the Suez Canal reminds me of a meeting you chaired almost exactly 1 year ago. Remember, consultants presented a long, detailed IRP report to the HPPW board, and when it was time for the HPPW staff to respond, they offered just a few slides, the last of which I saved, and I have it in front of me now. It says, quote, until the retirement of the Bell River plant in 2030, no major changes in city's emission rate of 19. In other words, we're stuck like some giant container ship sideways in the Suez Canal. But today we see an urgent response to the stuck container ship. In the BPW boardroom a year ago, however, there was no response at all. No one said, hey, wait a minute, stuck at 19 for 10 years? That's a problem. We need to do something. That silence a year ago in that room gave birth to the Holland Climate Collaborative and its ongoing call to act now. It's not okay to be stuck on 19 for 10 more years. We keep coming to your SDT meetings looking, hoping for some evidence of urgency. Will we see it soon? Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Don. Appreciate you. Laura, you're next.
Hi, Laura Judge, 6510 Oakwood Lane, Holland, 49423. Just one real quick comment. I would love it if we could get Mary Ellen Micah to weigh in on whether she thinks that the corporate world would see it as a very positive step for the city of Holland to declare a goal of cutting our CO2 emissions by 50% by 2030. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. I'm imagining that might come up a little later, or at least something around that. Okay, I don't see any other hands. So does anyone else have a public comment? And if you do, and you're talking, you're on mute. Okay, great. Thanks for the good commentary and thoughts. Always appreciated. We have also the online comments, which we received, and we need to, I believe, vote on acknowledgement of, or
correct. Yeah, we've got a total of 20 in there. 2 were directed to the SDT, and then as recommended and what we're doing here is anything that also is related to climate related issues that have gone to city council are also included in your packet. So that's the total of what's there, Brian.
Yep, great. So I'll ask for a motion to acknowledge them
So
So
moved.
move.
and a second.
Seconded.
Thank you, Boyd. Any commentary or thoughts that people wanted to share on the online comments?
No, yeah, of course. We always appreciate them, as you have acknowledged with the public comments. And we read them all. And I think, I always encourage civic engagement, and I love how people are paying attention. This is the most important issue in the world today. So I'm glad people are writing in.
Me
Speaking
too.
for myself.
Yeah. Tim? Were you going to say something, Tim?
No, I was just going to concur with what Nikki said. We want to encourage our community to participate in the process, and they're letting us know their thoughts, which is great.
Yeah.
Much appreciated.
Awesome. With that, vote in favor to acknowledge the online submitted comments as part of the official record of the meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. So officially acknowledged online comments. Thank you.
My apologies for stepping in for Keith, or he normally would have this down. Who moved and seconded that? I'm sorry.
Oh, that sounded like well, Boyd had the second for sure, and it sounded like a tie between Nikki and Tim. And so we'll do a arm wrestling session at Skiles later.
Yeah, I'll defer to Nikki. Nikki can have the motion.
And then
All
we'll
right.
walk down to the yogurt shop for dessert. right over the boat.
Thank
That
you.
is a wild story, by the way, that boat.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
That's
Yeah.
unbelievable. Cool. All right. So we're to part one of the meat of today. Today, we're going to be reviewing and chatting a little bit about what we talked about last time related to building consumption. We learned a lot about the residential stuff last time. So any noteworthy comments or further thoughts on that, now would be the time to share. And then when we're done with that part, we will do some intentional learning from Jim and Mary Ellen, sort of begin getting the corporate perspective as it relates to commercial and industrial facilities and energy. So yes, comments, questions, concerns, thoughts from last time in the residential building sector. And don't all go at once.
Yeah, and just a reminder to kind of maybe tee up the conversation here a little bit. And I appreciate that Ann Salyers is with us. Recall that she presented an update of all the different programs that have been underway and are currently being contemplated as it relates to the residential building energy consumption, including the history of our home energy retrofit and on-bill financing program. Also some discussion about our energy waste reduction program as it is focused on the elements that are focused on the residential sector. And then also some ideas and plans that we have in place for the future expansion of that program. And then finally, we just at the end started touching on any sort of policy related issues, but didn't really get too far into that. You know, things like we know that building codes are something that is controlled at the state level at this point anyway, and whether or not there'd be some changes that would give more flexibility here. Any other policy related issues as it relates to transparency on energy performance, or which are some of the things that are contemplated in the opportunity matrix, like rental properties, for example, as part of the licensing, should there be any transparency notices there. or any other, potential policy level or mandates that might come out as recommendations to pursue. So those are the kind of things that we touched on. And again, the opportunity matrix holds some potential strategies there, but certainly want to make sure that any other questions that have been, developed over the last couple of weeks or other conversation, we're here and ready to, respond to any of those questions or engage in that discussion.
Brian?
Yeah, go ahead, Nikki. That's great.
And I agree, Dave. With the building codes, we may not be able to have an effect, but we can do other policy things like the retrofit and follow that up, and tighten that program up. And I, every time we have council, every 2 weeks, I always report on the SDT. And I did this last week with much of what Dave said. And in the interest of full disclosure, I also added my personal thoughts, which were this time my impatience with the pace of things, and not to feel like you're getting beat up, but there are only so many things that we can have an effect on. And as I looked at the mayor's report, and I think it went out to the businesses, asked when the members of the team were asked to be on the committee, that this would last 6 to 9 months. And here we are in 8, and it's a big topic, and it's a wide and deep topic. But time goes on. And I mean, and I bet I say this every time we meet, but we need to come to a goal and a conclusion, because ultimately our efforts will go to the other team who then strategizes how do these recommendations get put into place. And I just see time unscrolling, and so I get impatient. So I just wanted to let you know I reported and then I added. So you can humor me and get moving. I am looking forward to the report today. I find our outside speakers are, we always lend that extra that we just don't get.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Nikki.
Yeah, you're welcome.
That's great. I would have said that much less politically correct. I think that one thing that, just a comment on that, is I think, because the strategic development team, what we're doing here is something that was set in motion 10 years ago to be done every 3 to 5 years, to recalibrate and make sure that we're focused on the right thing in the next 3 to 5 years, which when you're making a 40-year plan seems like a reasonable time frame to do this in. And when it comes to what we've been experiencing the last 8 months, and like how to make it faster without sacrificing quality, I think that part of our report out, at least if my opinion sticks at all, is that we would have some specific commentary on how to expedite this for next time for the people that are doing this in the future. And I think that what we're doing now is actually reasonably paced. But getting to, like, from September to January is what I think is all the opportunity on making everything faster, right? It's like getting everybody up to like ground zero.
Right.
It took us 4 months to like really like understand like what the heck we were doing. And now every 2 weeks we're like learning about a lever and we're moving forward. So anyways, that's just my 2 cents. Is I agree for next part of how we can make an impact for the future is lift up that this can be done faster and more efficiently. I'm sure Dave and Keith don't want to be doing this for 9 months either. So, and this is stuff that Dave literally lives and breathes every day. So I can't imagine how many times he's regurgitated the same stuff to a different group. And that's gotta be one level of annoying. And Dave's not saying that, that's me saying that. Dave, I'm sure, loves it, but
Absolutely.
so I just think that is definitely part of how we can make a positive impact moving forward, is having good ideas on how to make the whole thing faster for next time. So I agree with you. unfortunately, we are the barge in the Suez Canal right now a little bit. And so we just got to like, get on, we just got to like keep the thing turning a little here.
Well, the good news is, we are in that last lever at this point, right? I mean, we've been through the electric portfolio discussion. We've been through transportation. We've been through offsets. We've been through education, and now we're in the building energy consumption, which we've been through half, I guess, or one sector of it. And now we're into a couple of sessions here today on the industrial side, on more the business sector side. And so, when that wraps up here, we're trying to build towards this collective list of potential strategies to engage the public about, as well as yourselves, to wrestle with that list to say what's the highest priority within there. So I think we're, I hear what's being said. I think we're certainly anxious to get that to that point too, but we're getting pretty close at this point to having the outcome of these sessions here as far as the particular levers done.
Yeah.
Which will include the statement of our mission and our goal and all that as well.
It will include the full report of whatever is in there.
Great.
That's my politically correct.
I was just going to say, talk about politically correct.
This discussion is good.
Keith will be proud of me. Keith will be proud of me for that. Dave, I have a couple of questions, and you may or may not have answers, or maybe Ann does. So building codes, state mandated. Michigan has some version of new carbon reduction, task forces and things. I don't know how much of this stuff is like real, or if it's just like, policy speak and advertising. But do you have any sense of like, if building codes are on the state, chopping block, and when that will be, so that we can be more informed on how we want to live into or react or advocate for something?
Yeah, I know that what's happening at the state level with the governor's climate task force, there will be a comprehensive look at a number of different strategies that the state would pursue, and that building codes would probably be an element of that. I mean, I don't have that definitive, as that group is fairly new in meeting at this point, but what I do understand is that one of the new proposed versions of the code does include an appendix, which is a zero carbon based code. And that would require the state to adopt that code and along with the appendix. And if that would happen, then the city would have more flexibility with regard to implementing the appendix. And so that's a decision that will be at the state level yet, that has to be made. And I don't know the time frame for that, but I know that there are many other communities that are encouraging the city or the state to adopt the flexibility that exists within that appendix.
Got it. Do you guys have like a policy person or somebody that's like paying attention to that stuff, and that's a way we can like be roped in on communication as that's happening in real time, or as much as real time exists?
Yeah, I mean, we're trying to stay tuned on the work of the climate group, but in terms of the actual work of a building code adoption, that probably would be something that the Michigan Municipal League would probably track pretty closely, and Keith would be the best person to let us know any activities that are happening there on that specific action at the state level.
Got it. Okay. So for my Holland Climate Collaborative friends, that would be something that would be really exciting for them to advocate for and get behind, I would imagine, considering it's statewide.
Right. As it is right now, as you said, the first statement is that, the city really has to follow the state adopted code. So whatever those provisions are, that's what gets implemented at the local level. And it's only kind of within this appendix that exists in a code that hasn't yet been adopted by the state, that if they adopt the new code with the appendix, then there will be flexibility for local jurisdictions on that regard.
Got it.
So what may I ask about that? Because that's confusing to me. So what we can do, because we're trying to keep this whole thing to what is possible within our own control. What we can do is help people get their homes to be energy efficient, and however we support that. But what's with these little plaques that are in a building that say this building's doing the most they can? Where does that come from? Is that us?
The Pearl certification is part of our home energy retrofit program. So if a home participates in that program, whatever that improvement is, they will get a placard that they can display that will show that, and they can use that for the purposes of marketing their home, or just frankly, recognizing the level of investment that's been made in terms of the improvements that's there. So that Pearl certification that comes along with the home energy retrofit, participants in that program.
Can business do that too? Did they get a little plaque? I mean,
Businesses have options to pursue other types of accreditation. And I'm sure Mary Ellen can probably speak to this too, but the Holland BPW, for example, our service center is an Energy Star rated facility. So there are different accreditations that can be pursued on more of a business level. The Pearl certification really is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe and I'm sure Peter probably could weigh in on this too, but I believe that is primarily designed for the residential sector. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Thumbs up on that one. So, okay.
So we can recommend that in our report. That
we continue with that on a yes. And I think in terms of building codes, one of the things you can do is you can always encourage people to go beyond the code. But as far as like the mandates are concerned, right now, as the code is adopted, that's what the standard is that people must comply with in terms of the new building development. With this zero-based code that is part of an appendix on a code yet to be adopted, again, at a local level, that would be then an option for a locality to adopt something more stringent. And right now, that option does not exist because the code that is in place and adopted by the state is what we have to live with at this point.
It would be nice to encourage. There was a couple in England who won the Pritzker Architectural Prize for their work as they created developments, many of which were affordable housing developments. They worked with the land, and it was, not quite LEED certified, but that sort of thing.
Right. And Anna, maybe you want to touch on some of the work that we've done, like with Habitat in the past on new home development and some of the incentives that we did there.
I'd like to talk about Pearl a bit, in that it really is an inventory of your energy efficiency assets. Building code aside, it doesn't stop city council from having an ordinance that requires this information at the time of transfer of a property, whether that's a rental unit or a selling of a home. So that's something you could keep in mind, because it is pretty easy to do, and it does give good information that is not otherwise apparent to a future tenant or a home buyer. And then, Dave, what was the other that you wanted me to speak on?
As far as the, on the Pearl certification, you covered that. I think what the other thing, I lost it too a minute. I'm sorry.
Was the work with Habitat?
Yes, the Habitat homes, and what we did on those new homes there is we incentivized going beyond on that.
Right. Yeah. Habitat's always been very good about building their homes to the highest energy efficiency standards. And, before other builders in the community were using the Energy Star building standard, they use it for their homes in an effort to keep the cost of operating the home as low as possible for the homeowners. And yes, we do partner with them on, supplying light bulbs. We even a couple of times, if a Habitat homeowner, their refrigerator is more than 10 years old, we'll replace it. And, as part of our services that we provide to low-income qualified homeowners.
Right. And the other thing I would point out, based on what Ann's first comments too, if you look at the opportunity matrix, we identified those disclosure requirements as being possible strategies to pursue. And, one we actually put into the, as a possibility of looking at it in the licensing program for the rental properties themselves. But on the single family or homeowner occupied homes, those could be, disclosure requirements at transfer, as in and of itself. So again, these are the kind of things where, we've got these incentives out here, and then you've got maybe, ordinance level or mandates, because there's incentives get you so far, but are there other things that this group wants to recommend from a strategy perspective that gets more at the, requirements side of things. And I think that's something that we want to make sure that if it's on the opportunity matrix, you don't have any concerns or questions about that, at this time, or if that's something that's, worthy of staying on until there's a full list here to be vetted by this group.
A list of breakthrough strategies.
Yeah.
Yeah. Brian and Dave, Barry's had his.
I was going to say, my screen says Barry R. Is that Barry Rutherford?
It is.
Okay, then I don't want to hear from him. So let's move on. Barry, I'm kidding. Come on, buddy.
I just wanted to say real quick that the State Building Codes Committee meets every 3 years, or at least passes judgment every 3 years. And I don't know exactly where we are in that cycle, but that's kind of their progress, so to speak, is that every 3 years they'll pass a new building code. Well, they have the option to.
Is that residential, commercial, industrial, the whole thing?
Both.
Okay.
C&I code and residential code.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, and what I understand right now, the one that's up for availability has this appendix associated with it, but it would require the state to adopt it with the appendix.
Got it. What, Ann or Dave or Barry, what is you've told us about your increasing the the percentage of the energy waste reduction program on rebates, affectionately known as, from 1% to 2% after the state mandate goes away, and you're voluntarily doing this, and you're doubling the amount that you're going to basically invest into energy efficiency, which is awesome. Are you committing to a certain amount of time for that increase? Do you have to commit to a certain amount of time? How flexible and negotiable, malleable is that now that we're going to be past the state rules?
Let me start, Ann, and I'll let you jump in on it. We have really complete flexibility on that as far as the time that we would adopt that. We are kind of driven by a plan where we had a consultant help us with that, and the consultant really recommended that we step into it over a period of a couple of years. And so, going to 1.5% next year as being a way to start moving towards the 2%, and then within a few years here, within a couple of years of today, we're getting to that point of getting to the the 2% number. And so that is within our own purview here to design that. Now, one of the things that we always want to test, and really kind of using utility funds, it's incumbent upon us to test, is the cost effectiveness of that program, to make sure that compared to other ways of serving the customer's needs, that investing in those rebates is cost effective. And so the plan that we had put together did have, for all the different programs that would be put forward, they have cost effectiveness tests. And as long as that number is greater than 1, that cost effectiveness test result, then you are deemed cost effective for the test. And we have some margin. It's tighter on some of the programs, like in some of the business areas. The residential one, I think, still has some margin on it. But one of the things that we believe is going to happen too is that there'll be a saturation of some of the lower cost energy measures. And we're already seeing that to a certain extent. If you look at the last few years, the cost of the program has gone up for us on equivalent kilowatt hours saved. And that's because I think, especially as lighting gets more, lower cost, number one, but higher adopted, it's getting tougher to use lighting adjustments as the way to meet some of those goals. So you start getting into other areas where rebates may have to be more aggressive in order to continue to have the pace of savings.
How do you guys go about designing those programs? I mean, I know like Barry and Ann are intimately involved in like promoting and executing and implementing the programs as it relates to program design and being like, we're going to throw this much money at a compressed air leak study or that much money at a LED retrofit. How does that just function? Teach us how you guys decide.
Yeah, I'll let Ann and Barry, anybody that wants to take that one, because the nuts and bolts of that, Ann is a lot closer to that than I am. So
primarily by benchmarking other utilities and communities and what they're doing and trying to gather up ideas and listening within our own community and, for good ideas and what resonates with people. And this planning that we do, we sort of determine, how much are we going to get from lighting? What kind of savings can we expect to get from it, encouraging people to buy Energy Star appliances? And it's a little bit science and art.
Yeah, and that's why in a lot of programs, partway through a year, if a utility's not on track, they may like throw extra money at different measures because they don't think they're going to hit their goal based on how they designed the program at the beginning of the year. Is that's sort of why those programs can change throughout the year?
Yeah, and we've made some of those adjustments over time too, where we've figured that 50% of a project might be a limit that we fund, and then maybe we have to adjust that and say it's more like 75% of a project, or 25 and 50, whatever it might be. We look at what the potential is for stretching our money as far as possible to encourage as much savings as possible. Then the realities of the marketplace do somewhat, also factor into it. And at some point during the year, if we find that we're not meeting, the target as it relates to a particular implementation of a measure, then we've had adjustments that we've done as well, with that.
Yeah, it's an interesting spot for us to be from a strategic standpoint, because you already have in motion doubling that program, which sounds like a good direction to me. And so I'm tempted, and I don't know if other people feel this way, but like I'm tempted to get into the granularity to find out if we should or shouldn't be more aggressive when in fact you've already got doubling the program in motion. So I don't know how other people feel about our, what our role is relative to that, but it's an interesting sort of construct related to the timing and what's going on. PJ?
Brian, it related to this, and I'm hoping this is related to this. This question probably goes to Ann. The work that the BPW did with Semco for industrial companies. I think in one of your last report, you cited 6 companies that were in the pilot in 2020. And I know that Transmatic was in the previous year with almost 12 companies. And the result of that was a very comprehensive report that was given to us that highlighted a lot of the things that we were doing. It had measured savings in terms of electric, energy savings, energy intensity, natural gas savings, and so on. If we've got 175 rough industrial companies that are in our scope here, could we accelerate that program is further?
I want to be, so I'm just going to slide in here that we're and PJ, it's a really relevant question. We're technically, I think, supposed to be talking about the residential part right now.
I'm so sorry. I thought we were.
No, you're fine.
Buildings, and I heard industrial and.
Yeah. No,
I'm dying to talk about industry.
Yeah, no, and we're about to get into that with Mary Ellen and Jim, and that is really appropriate.
I'll hold
really
off.
Appropriate question. I just want to make sure that we don't get too far off residential while we're talking about it. So
totally.
Okay, I owe you a beer.
I have a house too, so
yeah,
probably have room for improvement there.
Fair enough. But the energy waste reduction program and the percentages, 1% a year to 2% a year, that's across residential and commercial and industrial.
Correct.
So that's an easy way to get from one, to be flip-flopping there.
Yeah, and the other thing, just to point out, I don't know that you really intended to say it that way or not, Brian, but the spend actually is more than double. So our investment in it is more than double. Our target is doubling, but we believe that to go higher, we're going to have to probably spend more per unit.
Yeah.
In order for that to happen. So the budget does reflect that. So just an FYI on that for the group too.
Yeah. To your point, it's not low hanging fruit anymore. So it's going to cost more to get every kilowatt hour saved moving forward is going to be more expensive than previously.
Yeah. Right. And I think Jeff had a question too. I didn't mean to.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I guess one thing that I haven't seen specifically in the residential discussion or the incentives that are as they're currently structured or planned is any sort of energy source switching from incentivizing switching from gas to electricity. For example, I don't know if there are any current heat pump, water heater, tankless water heater stuff. And the one thing that I kind of have been looking for and have not seen is any sort of home heating, heat pump type thing. I wonder, I know there hasn't been a study done on this, but combining it with existing programs, if you signed up for you got this discount, but then, or, some number of dollars off, but then you signed up for the 100% renewable energy rate or something like that. And you could market it as make your house green or something. I don't know exactly how you would do it, but I haven't seen any study on that. I haven't seen what kind of money could be thrown toward incentives on something like that. I know mandating it is probably above Holland's pay grade, but
right. Yeah, it's a great question, Jeff. And I know Ann could probably let me just touch on a couple things. One is we do, Ann, correct, have a heat pump water heater incentive.
Okay.
I believe. So that part is there. As far as other electrification is concerned, because I think the idea behind a heat pump water heater is you're not only electrifying it, but you're also making it more efficient. So there's some incentive on there. Then there's just the straight out electrification, which if the source of electricity is elected to be renewable, now you're making that kind of a carbon-free usage. And that's the next step here in our thought process too. EVs are kind of the first foray into that, where you're looking at incentivizing the move to an alternate fuel source for the transportation piece. But inside the home, there are opportunities for electrification as well, whether it's the heating source for the home, appliances, water heating, as we talked about, there are other opportunities for electrification. And we're wrestling with that right now. Frankly, I think we might have pointed out during the transportation piece that we have to think about the use of the public funds and make sure that we have a rational and supportable methodology as it relates to the use of those funds. And so what we're following on EV charger rebates, for example, the $300 rebate, is that represents about 4 years of net revenues for the electric utility. just like we do with a new line extension. Say if a business comes to town and they want to be hooked up, and it's going to cost us $30,000 to hook that customer up. We evaluate what the potential revenue or net revenue is over the next 4 years. And if that covers it, then the customer doesn't have to pay anything towards that hookup. And if it doesn't cover it, then we've got a contribution that they have to help make. So we kind of look at that as being the policy that we followed in deciding that we can create a rebate for the EVs, is based upon the fact that we've got this net revenue coming in, so it benefits the entire electric utility. And so further electrification might kind of follow that same sort of policy direction. But I think it's something that as a group, we see as an opportunity to work on, especially as people have the opportunity to green their own portfolio through the elective renewable energy rate, and as the BPW continues to transition its portfolio to a lower carbon one, that's an opportunity as well, Jeff. And I agree that is a strategy. It's on the opportunity matrix. We didn't talk a lot about it, but I think it's one of those things in terms of promoting electrification as a step towards that. And I don't know, Ann, I know your group is kind of looking at that too strategically. So I don't know if you have any comments you want to make there.
Well, I think the exciting thing about after this year, not needing to follow the old energy waste reduction rules, is that we can do things like encourage fuel switching. And one of the ahas to me, and I mentioned in the presentation at the last meeting, is that, and it gets at what Don was talking about, Don being stuck, is that if we can think about moving people away from using natural gas in their homes, it will help us reduce the footprint, and we're not handcuffed about having incentives for switching from natural gas to electric, or what we call electrification. And so I think there are some things there that we could look at, and like the water heaters, we wouldn't have been able to provide an incentive for somebody going from a natural gas water heater to any version of an electric one, because that's what they call fuel switching. But now we can provide those types of incentives. So I think that is opportunity for the strategic development team, is to look at how can we wean people off of natural gas in their homes that makes it more cost effective for the homeowner, and more energy efficient, and reduce carbon in the process.
That's good. Is
The last thing I'd say about that, to add on to Ann's comment, is there are some states that have been looking at moratoriums, some communities that have looked at moratoriums on new gas hookups, but I know that that's a very controversial subject. And there are several states that have been moving forward to put legislation in place to prevent moratoriums for being put in at the local level. So again, everything that we've been looking at has been more incentivizing it. But again, if there's a policy position out there to consider, it would be that, in terms of any sort of requirement, on the fuel source.
Well, I guess just to make, not to say that you guys didn't talk about that well, but I think right, a furnace you replace once every 20 years, right? So if you get somebody next year that puts in a brand new gas furnace, that's the lifetime is 20 years. Whereas if you get somebody next year if you can incentivize them switching to an electric heat pump, then you get that extra rate for the life of the heat pump, and they're never going to go back to gas. So I think, because of the life cycle of it, it's something that the earlier you get in, you start chipping away at this problem year by year, rather than trying to switch a whole bunch of things that are effectively, still have 10 years of useful life, and you're switching it then. You're if you can get in early enough, then it's not a significant added cost burn, and it's just you replace it, and when you replace it with electric.
Yeah. Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, Jeff, you just articulated effectively the large study downtown Holland on offering fuel switching for businesses downtown Holland as well. It's the same concept, right? Like these things don't get switched out very often. And so you want to be there when they do.
Mr. Chair, not to cut this too short on that, but we have the speakers with us today. I want to make sure we're respectful of their time too.
Yeah, I'm cognizant of that for sure, and was going to actually attempt to segue as well. We will, if again, like we're doing, we're learning, we're touching base afterwards, and then we will be circling back and digging in and writing the report on all of this. So this doesn't, this isn't the end of the residential conversation, but unless there's something burning right now, it is the end of the residential conversation for now.
All right, and let me just take a minute here just to kick this next section off. This is first of two parts on more of the business sector discussion. The next session that we'll have on April 19, we hope to have Ann's presentation on energy waste reduction for the commercial and industrial. We're also working on the possibility of bringing in Paul Sachs from the county. The Ottawa County is actually looking at PACE financing as a district here for Ottawa County. PACE financing is a kind of like an on-bill financing program in a way, but for business. And so that is something that is being contemplated at the county level. And so we want to also bring that as a possibility for the 19th. But today, very excited to be able to introduce a couple of speakers that we have with us, and just going to read through some information about each of them. Mary Ellen Micah is here. She's the Director of Global Compliance and Sustainability at Steelcase. After earning a degree in biochemistry from Michigan State and a master's from Western Michigan, she began her career at Steelcase as manager of air quality services and a senior environmental scientist. She led the energy procurement at Steelcase for a number of years and was involved with Ann, actually, in the development of the ANSI Furniture Sustainability Standard for the Business and Institutional Furniture Manufacturers Association, or BIFMA. And she is passionate about carbon reduction and clean air, and so she's going to have a lot to share with us this afternoon. And also, at the same time, I want to introduce Jim Stelter. And Jim is actually a resident of the city of Holland and serves with us on our Community Energy Plan Steering Committee as the community representative. And we're very grateful for Jim's business insight and connections, which have really led to the Ford mobility proposal that we've talked about already, with Jim's connection with Jim Hackett, formerly CEO of Ford Motor Company, but also his connections with Mary Ellen, who's speaking with us tonight. He too is a Michigan State grad. Sorry about the tournament this year, both of you, but he's got a long career as a Steelcase executive, and he's been a successful entrepreneur and currently is president of Smith System and more recent Steelcase acquisition, serving the K-12 school furniture market. And so Mary Ellen and Jim, thank you both for being here this afternoon. I don't know, Jim, if you want to make any quick introductory comments yourself, and then I know Mary Ellen has more of a presentation to share with us.
Absolutely. Thanks, Dave. First of all, you said you were going to do it enthusiastically, and I didn't feel the enthusiasm that I generally get from you. So I'd like you to be a little more enthusiastic about introducing us. Yeah, no, I'm gonna bow gracefully to somebody that we all know has a lot to say and is really a leader in Michigan, not just in Western Michigan, for what's going on. At the end, I would like to come back and talk a little bit about some of the things that we were hoping to get at least your input on, is should we go out and solicit feedback from the business community. But I'm gonna step aside and really let you learn from the expert. Mary Ellen?
All right. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, everyone, for the opportunity to speak today. And Jim and I are very excited to share information about our Steelcase climate commitment and talk more about kind of how it influences other businesses in the area and just the communities in which we operate. So I will share my screen. I will attempt to share my screen. And if you can let me know if you're seeing a slide, that would be great.
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Share. Okay.
Now it's coming up.
Okay, cool.
All right, looks like it's the outline version there. I don't know if it'll go to the slideshow, but.
Okay, and I can convert it to the slide. Show version.
Okay, it's still the outline at this point, but
okay, I think
let's
it's
see if
trying.
it'll.
I'm all set. I see it. I saw
Okay.
it.
Okay, cool.
Yep. All right, good.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm so accustomed to Teams. I've got to get sharper at using
Yeah, but
Zoom.
now it's gone away again.
Uh-oh.
Slide section was
But
okay.
your screen is black.
If
Yeah,
it's easier just to stick with the outline, maybe that'll work out all
my
right.
screen is black. I don't know what happened there.
Yeah.
Okay, that's not good.
Yeah, we see your mouse, but it's a black screen.
Yeah, I see absolutely nothing. So this is a problem.
Whatever you were doing before worked. It was up before.
Yeah.
Marianne, just hit escape on your keyboard.
Yep, I'm trying that. And nothing is happening. That's odd. Okay.
I'll tell you what, we could do this. Another thing you could do if you wanted to email it to us, we could try it here if you get your screen back.
Okay, I literally can see nothing on either of my screens. They are completely black. So I might have to reboot.
Okay, go ahead. While you do that.
And I'll jump back in.
Yeah, that's fine. While you do that, I'll go
that.
ahead and move ahead, if you don't mind, Brian, to an
Thank
update
you.
from Joe, just real quick. Unfortunately, Joe had a conflict come up this afternoon and is unable to be with us, but he wanted all of you to know, Joe Sikma, this is, that he's making good progress of things. And today, what he was planning on sharing was a quick progress report and a snapshot of the focus cities that he's zooming in on. And he actually has plans to meet with the sustainability managers from each city in the next couple weeks. And the idea there is to put together a community comparison sheet, which would actually be more of a comprehensive review of each of those cities' programs, and also share some of the information about strategies that they're pursuing. So he expects that in the next 2 to 4 weeks here, that his work will be complete on that, and he'll be able to have a full presentation on the benchmarking and community comparison survey.
Excellent.
Cool.
I look forward to the data.
Great. Okay. And let's see, anything else that we have on the agenda here real quick to capture?
Is she reapplying, Dave?
I think she looks frozen, so I'm guessing that she's in a reboot mode here at this point.
Okay, well, could I just maybe for the group, and then that'll save time for all of you so that you can stay focused on it.
Sure, Jim.
One of the things that has been brought up, and I'd just like to thank Don, because Don has been a real educator to me, and I'm real appreciative of his time. So one of the things that we are contemplating, or we brought to the group for discussion, is do we go to a number of the kind of a cross section of the businesses and ask them what they think? Not one of the things that Dave has been super clear with me, Dave and Keith, is that we don't want to in any way have the businesses feel burdened by any of the things that we may be contemplating. So I've always found it good. Like I have responsibility for all of education at Steelcase now. And so talking to my dealers or talking to people and just asking them what they think is always a great way to start and kind of frame a conversation around a cross section from the hospitals to education to automotive suppliers to furniture suppliers. And I have a list of those, and go to the leaders of those communities and have a conversation with them and gel together kind of a point of view of what the businesses are thinking. And I think as one of our guests or the people that spoke earlier said, I really reflected on it, is that a lot of the businesses are probably anxious to move ahead and probably have pretty good plans. There a lot of them over the last several years have gotten very aggressive. So again, I don't want to, Mary Ellen is really the featured person today. I'm a stopgap measure, but I put together a little presentation I shared with the group that was just a series of questions that kind of had a position, here's where we are, but really listen to them and come back to you saying, we talked to these, and I'm thinking of 20 or 30, of which I dedicate my time along with Don and whomever from the city, maybe we rotate people through, of going and meeting with these folks. And there's nothing wrong with listening. So that's what I proposed to Dave and Keith and Ann and the whole team. And they just wanted to reflect on that and get your input on that.
Yeah, and that obviously could be a going forward strategy that it would complement really the fact, I think this, just to make this group aware again, the task that Keith and I have at this point to put together the drafts of public engagement surveys using the Frost Institute at this point. And so on the business sector, actually, we're going to be meeting internally with our team here to discuss some potential questions for that survey. It is not completed yet at this point, but that would be the idea, is to try to put that together. And I think Jim's, some of Jim's questions that he has there would be good input into that. But additionally, when the surveys are responded to and we have an assessment of those that have maybe more advanced thinking and goals among our business community, it could provide an opportunity for us to zero in on those for that follow-up discussion and listening tour.
Yeah, I think one last little thing that I think is really important. A survey, we talked about this last time, is always crucial because it gives you the overview. One of the things I like when talking to individuals is you get a lot of stories, and there's a lot of color that's built around those surveys that don't necessarily come through. It could be the passion, or you could find a group of leaders that you didn't know before that maybe aren't on a written thing. And I think you get a lot of credit for being a group that goes out and starts that listening tour. So pardon me, but Dave and Keith and Ann wanted input from all of you on this.
Yep. Yeah, I think, Dave, you're right. It sounds complimentary, where I think the survey, not only does it do what you said, Jim, but it also is, it'll be another 3 weeks, I believe, before that gets out there. And this can maybe get started now, and we'll have something. I like it. And I think you're right. Businesses have seen this coming. Their countries and now cities and businesses, they see it happening. They're on it. Some of it may be aspirational at this point, but they know that the world is changing, and everyone wants to.
Yeah, you're spot on. I think what Mary Ellen and others have coached me on is you don't go at it saying, hey, you got to do this. You're saying, why does this benefit business? Why does it help your revenue stream? Why does it help your cost stream? The government is going here. You should prepare yourself for it so that you're ahead of the curve instead of having to react to something the government potentially on a federal level could come back with. So those are the questions, and those are kind of the direction that I've been coached to go in.
I love this. This is fantastic. The one output that I think would be neat, I'm trying to envision how the businesses may appear on a spectrum of readiness. And I'm picturing the strategy that could come out of that for even us to be able to frame a little bit more clearly where and what type of, a little segmentation of that spectrum. So, certain strategies may be applicable for some, but not all. And I think that starts to narrow down the problem just a hair, but also highlight strategies that don't have to be painted with such a broad brush. And I just picture the work for the upcoming teams being more scoped down, and the problem not seeing so daunting if there was a way for the survey to highlight that type of a spectrum.
Could I make sure I'm capturing it? Because I'm taking some notes, Boyd. So you sprung to action something. So if there's somebody that, you know, say is a big company and further down the path towards whatever goal that is, we can create communities of action. One of the things, I'm in the education side, one of the most powerful learning experiences when you're around others that have done it, that aren't necessarily consultants or other people. Hey, I'm a small business owner in retail, as an example. And here's the things that I'm doing, or I'm somebody in automotive, because I know, fortunately, a lot of those folks. So, and we could rotate you all through, so different people could come and experience this through the calls to action. Mary Ellen knows a lot of these folks too, and would be very gracious in helping us get introductions to them.
Yeah.
So did I capture it, Boyd?
I think so. I think what I'm not is clear on, but you're probably further ahead, is to accomplish a spectrum of readiness, or you almost have to have a vision of what readiness might look like, you know, a high level. And so the questions, without being leading questions and things like that, you almost have to make sure those questions are shaped in a way that allows you to get to some kind of segmentation, as well as the cross section to talk to. Just, that's the only thing I'm thinking. I mean, I think that would be huge in our output to have some reference that frames the 70% problem down a little bit more, you know, with clear strategies that may be effective for some groups, but not others.
Excellent input. I got it. Thank you.
Yeah, and gosh, Mike, I'm gonna kill my computer. And Mary Ellen, we see you there. And are you good on your tech or feeling good?
I think so.
Okay, cool. Well, we'll jump back to you here in 1 second. Jim, and like, I think, and Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, but doing a more intentional sort of like less survey-y, more one-on-one with the top businesses was sort of on the radar for us. So this sounds, to me anyways, right in line. I can tell you pretty confidently, because it's my business, that even companies that have a plan that look really robust and tight, I can tell you almost with 100% certainty that almost 100% of them, even with a great plan and an aggressive plan, don't have all of how they're going to do it mapped out. And so for us, having the city and having programs that will help them get traction is going to be, they're going to be super pumped about that. And we work with companies much bigger than Steelcase and much smaller, and they're all basically in a similar spot, which is, we know we need this, or we have a very aggressive plan, but you know, people are not going to like, you know, come forward and be like, we don't really know exactly how we're going to get there. They're not going to say that because it's like, you know, their job. But I can tell you a lot of confidence that most of them are looking for good programs and entities to partner with to help them get there. And so I think doing the surveys is great. The readiness to act thing, I don't know, it'll be good to ask about, but I'm a little skeptical how truthful people will be, because if they say they're not ready, they're basically admitting they don't know what they're doing. And
you don't do that.
They're learning on the fly.
Yeah.
And I know if there's support out there and some kind of interest and collaboration, possibly. Yeah, this is good.
Yeah, companies want partners. They want partners and they want programs to participate in, and they want local ones. And so, anyways,
Brian, you triggered something in my brain right there. What you said, I think I missed a big important word. It isn't just the spectrum of readiness. I think it's also the spectrum of acceptance. I'm really curious to not just run out with the premise that, like you said, most maybe have accepted, but now are they ready, or what next? I think some data around the idea even of acceptance first is a big deal. for us even to say, well, what percentage and what type of a segmentation has accepted the need? That to me is fascinating, right? Because without accepting the need, you created, that's a different group. That's a different strategy and different challenge than those who have accepted the need and maybe have some level of action starting, but they don't know where to go, versus others who are further along in the spectrum that maybe have some resources wrapped around it, plans written down. So that's what I was trying to get at, was this idea, acceptance to implementation. There's phases in there. To me, that is fascinating, and really from a strategic standpoint can guide so much for so many people.
So to both of you, and I know Mary Ellen is the meat of the matter, but I also, in my experience, is it's okay to get started on something and things emerge. So if you're out there talking to these folks, I think it'll be beautiful, but I think we'll be surprised by some of the things that we learn and how other people begin to step forward to create these communities. The only thing, Brian, I'd not challenge you on, but want clarity on, is I don't know that it's only big business. I would have like segmentation around some of the other folks that could be just as powerful, some of the smaller ideas of how they can go, and not just, sometimes people see, you see a big story and you go like, I'll never do that. But maybe if there's some smaller ones too, so we can know everybody can participate in business. And that was one of the things I wanted to segment a little bit. Is that okay with you, Brian?
Yeah, I think it's great. I think I love that. I think how previously we had sort of talked about like more of a one-on-one vibe with the major industrials, because doing things that they will take action on will really move our needle down. But if there's an impetus and a desire to have more intimate conversations with smaller businesses, I think that that's great. And and I agree 100%, you're going to learn all kinds of good stuff. Actually had a conversation with a company just last week that was small, and their client is people like Dow Chemical, and they were like, for them, it's an opportunity for them to lead up.
Yes.
And this little company actually is doing stuff much more impressively than a lot of very big companies. And I was very encouraging of them that they should not be shy about telling their story.
But that's one of the things we talk about, is by your supply chain is going to start asking these questions. And if you are a leader in that, these small companies will become larger companies in Holland to be able to support the business community.
Yes,
that's exactly right. And the other, anyway, I'm taken away from Mary Ellen. So it was going to be second with me because she's the brains of the group. I wanted to just get that on the table. I'd like your input. And the other thing that I heard today is, hey, it's an action that I think we can all look at and learn from. So if you want, I'd love to move ahead, put it together, arrange it, maybe with Mary Ellen, some of the first people that she knows, and let's just step off the end of the cliff and we'll see what happens. I guarantee somebody will catch us and it would be wonderful. Mary Ellen, over to you.
That's super good. And Dave, you can route this through to Jim or whatever, but I can be very helpful in getting people to the table for you as well, Jim.
Bring it on. Bring it on.
All right, ready?
Absolutely.
Hey, Mary Ellen.
I think I'm going to leave it in the outline mode, if you don't mind, just to be sure.
In case.
So
yeah, and it looks great. It looks like it's plenty big enough to see.
Big enough. Okay, good. Okay, so we're really excited to be here and talk about our climate commitment and more than that too. So for starters, quick overview. So I'm going to give a little bit of history about renewable energy purchasing at Steelcase, and also the history of our greenhouse gas emission reductions. And then the big thing is, what do we know now that we did not know back in 2010 when we first set our goals, and coincidentally at about the same time that the BPW set their goals. Then I'm going to talk a bit about the new carbon strategy itself, and then its ripple effect on our supply chain, and also how we, by committing to science-based targets, can basically put ourselves at a competitive advantage with our customers. And then I'm going to give a few regional comparisons. So we'll get moving along. So for our renewable energy investments, so we started investing in renewable energy 20 years ago. Back in 2001, made a big move in 2009 when we became the sole corporate sponsor of a wind farm in Texas that was called the Weggy Wind Farm after one of our founding families. In 2014 is actually when we committed to 100% renewable energy globally for all of our Steelcase operations. And ever since 2014, we have stuck to that. So we are committed for the long term to purchase 100% renewable energy for our global electricity usage, regardless of how we obtain that electricity. So we would love to have a combination of on-site renewables in addition to renewable energy credits. One thing that we did do is we engaged in a virtual power purchase agreement in 2016. So that was new for us. That's with a large wind farm in Oklahoma. We have actually a 25 megawatt portion of that wind farm for our RECs. But in addition to that, we continue to buy renewable energy credits off the market and we'll maintain that 100% commitment. So in terms of our greenhouse gas emissions, which very much tied in with our renewable energy use, but also a bit different, we had made a goal back in 2010 to come up with a 25% reduction in our greenhouse gas emissions in 10 years, so by the year 2020. And we just came out with our annual report about 6 months ago and reported on the progress with all of our 2020 goals. And we were able to report that we exceeded our greenhouse gas emission reduction goal, and in fact came out with a 34% reduction. So we were excited about that. But as soon as we came out with that, we realized, you know what, we actually need to do more. And we also know that what we did so far is kind of the low-hanging fruit. So the challenge definitely increases significantly as we come up with more plans to reduce, but we recognize that the science is telling us we need to do that. So what happened actually between 2010 and 2020 that really caused us to reevaluate our goals and to begin to set more challenging goals? Basically, it was this new scientific information. So back in 2015 is when the Paris Climate Agreement was signed. And just 3 years later, there was an Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report that came out and really tightened what it is that we need to meet in order to prevent the most catastrophic effects of global warming. So basically, we talk about how today we've already increased the global temperature by approximately 1 degree Celsius since pre-industrial times. But the Paris Agreement had said it's important to keep global warming to no more than 2 degrees Celsius. Essentially, they had talked about well below 2 degrees Celsius, but not going as far as 1.5, even though I know that sounds very close. The IPCC came out with a report saying, oh, no, you have to shoot for 1.5. And in fact, this is more urgent than we realized. This is something we need to be doing sooner than 2050 or end of the century. So with that information, we realized we definitely needed to do more. So a 34% reduction was tough for us, but again, not enough based on what we're understanding from the science. And I'd like to kind of explain a bit more about the difference between the 1.5 and 2 degrees, because to Emily's comment earlier, this is a really important issue so that people understand how critical it is that we act urgently. So basically, here's an article from the World Resources Institute, and the title, "Half a Degree of Warming Makes a Big Difference." If you look over here in the chart with the 1.5 degrees and 2 degrees, and then you see what the impacts are in the relative impact just for that additional 0.5 degree Celsius of warming. It's 10 times worse in terms of this Arctic ice, basically the number of ice-free summers that would happen in the Arctic. It's 29% worse for coral reefs. It's 2 times worse for other, categories here. It's a very big deal to look at the difference between shooting for limiting warming to 2 degrees versus trying to limit it to an even tighter range of the 1.5 degrees. And how much harder is it to limit it to 1.5 versus 2 degrees? Well, either one is very tough. We're basically on a trajectory as a globe to go significantly beyond the 2 degrees Celsius. So it's going to be tough no matter what, whether we're shooting for 2 degrees, whether we're shooting for 1.5 degrees, even if we're shooting for 2.5 degrees, that would be significantly better than the trajectory we're on right now. But the difference is, if we talk about limiting warming to 2 degrees Celsius, we're talking about approximately a 20% reduction in emissions over a 10-year period. So from 2020 to 2030. Am I saying that correctly? Sorry. From 2010 levels to 2030. In contrast, the 1.5 degrees Celsius means we would have to more than double that effort. We would have to come up with a 45% reduction in emissions just to meet that slightly tighter temperature range. So armed with that knowledge, we came out in August with a press release and our announcement of our new carbon strategy. And what we announced is carbon neutral today and carbon negative is what we're shooting for in 2030. And it's not just carbon negative, it's actually carbon negative through 50% absolute emission reductions in our operations and acting aligned with this 1.5 degrees Celsius trajectory. So basically it's with following the most ambitious goals of the Paris Agreement and also following the recommendations of the IPCC. So doing our part as a company and hoping that we can also influence others to do the same. So again, number one, carbon neutral today, and that's through purchasing of renewable energy and offsets. What we did is we set the most ambitious greenhouse gas emission reduction targets verified by the Science Based Targets Initiative. And what's important about the Science Based Targets Initiative is that that is the external mechanism to get verification for your goals. So it's a way to make sure that people aren't just making claims that maybe are not quite accurate. So it's important to go through that step. Number 3, Steelcase will be carbon negative in the year 2030 through 50% emission reductions, along with the need for fewer purchases of RECs and offsets. And what that means is we're actually going to save a lot of money by the time we hit 2030. So even though we have to have some initial investments that are fairly significant, we're going to end up benefiting monetarily from this huge effort. So this graph that you're looking at right now shows basically what's going on with our scope 1 and scope 2 emissions. And I won't go into great detail, but the trajectory you see here is kind of like a line showing carbon neutral because we made that decision and decided to purchase offsets to achieve carbon neutrality as of August globally for Steelcase. We're going to stay at that level all the way through to 2030 because we'll continue to buy offsets, we'll continue to buy renewable energy credits, but all along those years, we are going to incorporate energy efficiency opportunities, potentially on-site renewables, all kinds of different activities that will allow us to reduce our investment in purchasing renewable energy credits and purchasing offsets. So by 2030, we know we will realize a significant energy cost savings as well as the savings in RECs and offsets. And again, this is just a picture of scopes 1 and 2. So I will jump to scope 3 for a minute here. And this is where it gets fun and where we really have an influence on our supply chain and where our customers have a big influence on us. So if we step back and look at the big picture of scopes, and actually I'm going to jump ahead to one other slide to describe the 3 different scopes. This slide will give you an idea of how the Science-Based Targets Initiative looks at greenhouse gas emissions and how each individual business should be looking at it. We look at our scope 1 and scope 2 emissions as those that we have greater ability to influence. The scope 1 emissions are very direct emissions. Those are happening right on our site. We can definitely influence those. We could buy more efficient equipment. We could install renewables. We could do a lot of things to try to reduce scope 1 emissions. Scope 2 emissions is where it gets a little bit trickier because that's the emissions associated with our electricity usage. So to some extent, we're all dependent upon how clean the particular electricity provider is or the grid is that we're getting our electricity from. But we can purchase renewable energy credits to help offset any of the scope 2 emissions that we have. When it comes to scope 3, these are things that are very, very tough to control. Things like employee commutes. That would be very tough to control unless you're willing as a company to mandate that everyone works remotely forever. There might be one way to control it. Something like purchase goods and services is what we refer to as our supply chain emissions. And I'm actually going to jump back to this previous slide for a second here. So the way we divide our scope 3 emissions from our scopes 1 and 2 emissions is that at Steelcase, we have projected that our scope 3 emissions are vastly greater than our scope 1 plus scope 2 emissions. And what that means when we approach the Science-Based Targets Initiative to get verification for our goals is that we have to commit to reductions for scope 3, even though it seems like it is hardly in our control. So what we did is we have committed to having 80% of our suppliers buy emissions. It's 80% by their greenhouse gas emission quantities. We have committed to having them set their own science-based targets by 2025. We've also committed to 14% reductions in emissions from waste generated in our operations and another 14% from business travel. So I'm going to tell a little bit more about the supplier-related emissions, and this is where it gets fun. So again, back to this slide showing the 3 different scopes. Our suppliers' greenhouse gas emissions to make our products are considered Steelcase's scope 3 emissions. So even though they're in direct control of our supplier, they are also something that we are responsible for. So it gets tricky trying to have an influence to reduce them. And our decision basically to set science-based targets will have a ripple effect on our supply chain. So when I talk about a ripple effect, think of it as how our emissions at Steelcase are actually a subset of our customers' scope 3 emissions. So we have customers who are very motivated to have their suppliers commit to science-based targets in order for those same customers to achieve their goals. So this is putting us at a competitive advantage. Not only is it helping, the planet and helping with all of our health, also saving us money in the long run, but it's actually putting us at a competitive advantage. And the same goes for our suppliers. So we are in turn asking our suppliers, basically pressuring our suppliers through these multiple education efforts and encouragement about all of the benefits of setting science-based targets. We're encouraging them to do the same because that will reflect on our ability to meet our goals. So enough about Steelcase. So what are other organizations in the region doing in terms of renewable energy commitments and greenhouse gas reductions? So first, and most importantly, BPW, I'm impressed with the goals that you set and how early you set them. So what goals were set in 2010 by the BPW for greenhouse gas emission reductions, and what has been accomplished since then? So my understanding is that the base level was the 24 tons per person annually, and that the commitment is to reach 10 tons per person by 2050, which is roughly equivalent to about a 15% reduction each decade. So at this point, having reached the 19 tons per person level, you've already exceeded that 15% reduction goal. So that's awesome. That's a great start to it. And I think the big question is whether that is a fast enough pace given the new urgency from the new information that we all have. But the BPW clearly is off to a great start. That's awesome. Also, the fact that it's offering the opportunity for customers to purchase renewable energy credits is a big help. And I think Don mentioned too that there may be other opportunities to purchase renewable energy credits. And there are, in fact, we could help with that at Steelcase. We could, I reached out to our offset provider and our renewable energy credit provider and learned that we could, in fact, bundle together some sort of offering that would be at a very competitive rate if there were residences or if different businesses were interested in taking advantage of that in order to increase their commitment to renewable energy or carbon offsets. So in addition, other West Michigan companies have set science-based targets. So Whirlpool, Pfizer, and Kellogg's have all set science-based targets. I think somebody had mentioned Kraft Heinz. They are committing to set science-based targets. So they're kind of at that initial step, but that's a big step to even register with the Science-Based Targets Initiative and in fact commit to setting targets. When we look globally, over 1,000 companies have now taken action and have set science-based targets. 461 of them have actually set them at that most ambitious level, which is the 1.5 degrees Celsius level. So this number is changing every day. It's been so impressive to see in 2020 in particular, even though everybody has said so many bad things about 2020. One good thing about 2020 is that companies really got serious about climate commitments, and there have been many of them. And so if I watch the Science-Based Targets Initiative page, I can see this changing constantly with more and more commitments all the time being reported. So that's impressive. Also, the state of Michigan and the city of Grand Rapids have made serious climate commitments. So the state of Michigan committing to be carbon neutral by 2050. City of Grand Rapids is committing to 100% renewable energy for all of its electricity purchases by June of 2025. And how that looks on the graph that the city shows, it's pretty impressive. So basically, this enormous portion of greenhouse gas emissions that the city of Grand Rapids is responsible for will go to zero at 2025 if they meet their goal. And they're pretty certain about meeting their goal. Ann and I both serve on the Grand Rapids Energy Advisory Board, and we know that they're very committed to this. And what's cool to see too is that they are hoping to meet their goal through a combination of efforts. So not limited to just renewable energy credit purchases, but also to on-site renewables, such as on-site solar projects. And what's happening right in our neighborhood. So I don't know how many of you drive down Lakeshore North to Lake Michigan Drive, But when you see the huge Lake Michigan filtration plant, by October of this year, you will see solar panels in the front yard of that particular building. So this was just approved a couple of weeks ago. I think it was March 10th that it was approved. Solar power for the Lake Michigan water filtration plant. Basically a 1 megawatt ground mounted solar array. It's going to save $1.2 million over 24 years for the city of Grand Rapids Water Department, and will increase the city's renewable energy performance by almost 5%. So that's a pretty significant contribution to that 100%. And I think it's pretty cool because for those of us who go by this corner often, and I live right in Ottawa County too, so I actually live very close to this corner. Here's a current view of the Lake Michigan filtration plant from the corner of Lakeshore Avenue and Lake Michigan Drive. Not too pretty, as you can see here. Nice bike path though. And here's what it's going to look like after the solar panels go in. So it's not a huge difference, but you can see all the landscaping that will be added. And here are the solar panels back here, very close to the ground. So they're not even that obvious themselves, but it'll be more attractive looking, in my opinion, than it was before. But I think that's pretty cool that something is happening right here in Ottawa County that is part of the city of Grand Rapids' efforts. So in conclusion, and I wanted to save time for questions too, if you have any, there are so many reasons to do this. There are so many reasons to commit to renewable energy and to commit to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. It's the right thing to do. We know it's important for health, not just the health of our planet, but the health of people and everything on the planet. Good for our bottom line. It meets our customers' scope 3 expectations, which means it does provide a competitive advantage for us. It also reduces risk in the supply chain associated with climate change, and it strengthens communities. So we think it's win-win-win, and would love to help encourage other businesses to do the same. And I would imagine that many are already thinking about it and taking steps to do it themselves. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions if you have any.
Marianne, that was fantastic. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
Looking back through this journey, especially on the supply chain side, what would you say from a pushback or concern standpoint, what were the themes that you, in percentage, any perspective you have about that journey, with supply chain for, getting on board, getting clarity, can you just kind of frame that up a little bit?
Sure. So this is the stage, okay, because we just announced in August, we have held webinars now, just 2 rounds of webinars with our suppliers in North America and Europe, or EMEA, and 1 set of webinars, but both in English and Mandarin, for our suppliers in the Asia Pacific area. And it's definitely going to be challenging. We're impressed that our suppliers are very interested, very engaged in learning about setting science-based targets, and just trying to understand what would be involved, how they can possibly commit to this, and whether they can in fact commit to it by 2025, because they know we're going to be scoring them partly based on that commitment. We score our suppliers based on many different things, quality and cost and all kinds of different factors, but this is one important factor as well. So right now we're at the stage where I think a lot of them are just hearing about it for the first time. That's not true for all. Some have actually set science-based targets, but those are the few. Most have heard very little about it. So it's, I think, going to be a big education effort and a lot of hand-holding potentially along the way. Yeah, so far no one has said no outright. They all seem very cautiously optimistic about it, like excited and curious about learning more, but a little nervous at the same time, I would say.
This is exciting. And maybe this will generate our passion to continue and to do more. One thing we know is climate change and all this energy reduction. It's an economic issue. And so as you went forward, we're concerned about return on investment and all that. How did you just break through that? And how did you know? I mean, obviously it has been profitable for you. Did you know that? Did you have to work that out ahead of time, or did you hope for the best as you planned and went through with your plan?
So we've had different opportunities to learn about the costs and also the payback along the way. So I would say initially in 2014, when we committed to 100% renewable energy, that was a cost to us because we were then choosing to pay for renewable energy credits for the entire scope 2 global emissions, from Steelcase, or global electricity usage, I should say, from Steelcase. So that was a cost. What we decided to do in 2016, when we entered into a virtual power purchase agreement, was to mitigate that cost somewhat. It wasn't through a true financial hedge, but almost an instrument that's similar to hedging against our current electricity prices. Kind of a long story with that, but we did manage to save some money through that virtual power purchase agreement in terms of our renewable energy commitment. In August of 2020, when we just committed to being carbon neutral, we had all of a sudden a huge new purchase that we had to make for carbon offsets that we had never done before. So that was a big cost to us. And that's something we will continue to incur, but at a steadily decreasing level for the next 10 years or more than 10 years if we need to continue buying them. So the way that we worked out the overall cost is from the chart. I don't know if you can still see this graph.
Yep, we can see it.
We know the rate at which we have to reduce our emissions, basically, and reduce our energy usage year after year in order to meet these goals in 2030. And we know how much that is going to save us in terms of our electricity costs, in terms of our fuel costs for our scope 1 sources, and then in turn, how much it will reduce the amount that we need to spend on RECs and offsets. So in the end, it becomes a big savings for us. But initially, yes, it is a cost to us.
Are you, Mary Ellen, are you actually operationalizing the internal? I'm hearing you say you're establishing an internal price of carbon. Are you like deploying that into, people who are submitting projects at like the facility level for them to actually factor into their, internal ROI business cases up the chain so that they're like, people on the plant floor are understanding like, oh, this is going to save us $52 in carbon offsets in addition to the energy? Or is that just something you're calculating at corporate? I guess talk about that and also into the supply chain.
Okay, so I can't speak for how our suppliers might do that. We would be happy to give them advice or tell them how we plan to do it. But we did just get approval from our top leadership to incorporate what we're calling a shadow carbon price. And that is a price that we will apply to what we call a management authorization request at Steelcase. And MAR is something that, let's say someone in our operations area needs a new big piece of equipment, some huge capital cost or whatever. They have to go through this MAR process in order to get approval. Well, if it's going to be something in Michigan, this shadow carbon pricing will apply so that it will help with the ROI. Basically, we would have a shorter payback than we would otherwise have, or we would have a bar that's easier to reach. It kind of evens things out in terms of environmental projects versus projects that are not specifically for environmental purposes. And the reason we're making this specific to our Michigan projects, our Michigan MARs, is because within the state of Michigan, we are part of that 10% choice program for electricity purchasing. So we don't actually purchase from consumers. We purchase from a different electricity provider, and our rate is very, very competitive, which is wonderful in the sense that we save a lot of money on electricity, year after year. But it's a bad thing when you try to price out on-site renewables, because all of a sudden your payback period is much longer.
Yeah.
So in order to not have that work against us, we're internalizing this carbon shadow price.
Yeah, that's a little for next time and future times, interesting thread for our committee to talk through the ramifications of, because it's sort of counterintuitive, but lower electric costs actually disincentivize energy efficiency and renewable energy projects because it just stretches the financial ROI. And so I don't know how this would work relative to the BPW, but if there was a way we could establish an internal, like a community cost of carbon, and that could factor into people's like rebates or something, that would be the way we could sort of model after how the business community thinks about this. I don't know if it exactly works, and probably a tangent we can't get on, but that's a really interesting, that's a really interesting point you make.
Real quick, one thing I will say is it does make maybe the investment at a site more challenging. Lower energy rates do allow for the layering on of renewable energy credits a little bit easier by having a lower energy price to start with. So what it does, renewable energy credits sort of recognize the fact that those investments were made in a very large scale manner, as opposed to, even the site where Grand Rapids is doing at the water plant, 1 megawatt compared to a 50 megawatt array or a 60 megawatt array, there's significant economies of scale difference associated with that. So.
And you have to have both. If you have to have a plan, or the renewable energy credits won't work forever. I mean, you have to continue on.
Eventually the using up of those credits spurs more to investment. The question really is, where does that scale? Where's the investment made best? At scale, large or smaller at site, and I think it also matters too. It's a question I was going to ask Mary Ellen in terms of kind of this either shades of green on the renewable energy credit or the offsets. Is Steelcase putting any limitations right now on the credits that are received in terms of additive nature or offsets in terms of how close to their locations those projects might be, or is it kind of a free and open in terms of the selection of those?
So it's not free and open. The way we have looked at our renewable energy credit purchases is we have always prioritized additionality, hence the investment in the virtual power purchase agreement. That was one of the big reasons. We also achieved additionality when we had the Weggy Wind Farm sponsorship, because that would not have been built without our investment there. But that's not to say that all of our renewable energy credits can be claimed to have additionality. They can't all. More than 50% do, but not all of them. When it comes to offsets, we have very strict requirements. They have to be, for renewable energy credits, they have to be Green E certified also. But when it comes to offsets, yes, they have to meet various criteria, and I'm going to forget what that is. One starts with a V, one starts with a C, but there are multiple criteria. We actually purchase them through National natural capital partners today. And we had choices of a number of different projects to invest in. And we chose it almost like you would choose your own financial portfolio. We chose to invest in projects that are specific to reforestation and afforestation. So they're very much actively sequestering CO2. We did not want to invest, for instance, in landfill gas projects, which were much less expensive. We also made sure that we invested in projects that represented different locations in which our company operates. So we purposely chose them based on location as well. So cost-wise, they're probably middle of the road. Like we could save a lot of money on our offsets if we reduced our criteria and went to the cheaper ones, but we don't want to do that either. But our offsets are much more expensive than our renewable energy credits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Other questions for Mary Ellen?
Yeah, great stuff.
I'll ask one more since she's here, and I know we're up against 5 o'clock. I don't want to leave it too long, but I guess, looking at, the 3 companies you mentioned that have already done among the 1,400 that have done the registry on the science-based targets. What's your general sense of the region here in terms of, primary manufacturers and kind of their journey right now towards that? Is it in the Holland area? If we kind of look at, I don't know if you know enough about the Holland area to kind of have a sense of whether or not we have, according to Jim, in accordance with Jim's listening tour, what kind of response do you think we're going to get here in the Holland area?
I would think it would be good. So what I did not include on that slide, because I actually showed just companies who had a very large presence in West Michigan. I did not show Ford or GM on that slide. Both Ford and GM have committed to setting science-based targets. They haven't yet set the targets, but they are right on the chart with that SBTI, the Science-Based Targets Initiative, as planning to commit to them. So that's key. And that should be a real indicator to any of the automotive suppliers that it's going to be very important for them to consider that. That'll put them at a competitive advantage. And same thing for the suppliers to the furniture industry. I mean, just because we went first doesn't mean we'll be the only furniture company, doing this, committing to science-based targets. And we, for one, Steelcase certainly has suppliers in the area in Ottawa County, but we work with our competitors through BIFMA, and they're very environmentally responsible as well. I know they're very committed to renewable energy investments. They'll probably soon try to take the next step and, do some sort of science-based targets or carbon reduction commitment as well. So I would think it would matter to these smaller suppliers to position themselves, even if it's just for that reason. Obviously, there are many other reasons to do it, but it really is important when a customer is looking at their supply base and realizing that, oh my gosh, I have to convince 80% of my suppliers, by emissions, to do the same thing or do something similar. They don't have to commit at the 1.5 degree level, but they have to commit to science-based targets. And that still is a very heavy lift.
And Mary Ellen, I want to compliment you and Steelcase on stepping out with the science-based targets, because in particular of the deep emphasis on the supply chain, what that really does is, whether another furniture company that's closer to Ottawa County officially signs up or not, that your commitment, your increased commitment pulls the whole supply chain along anyways, because, I'm imagining a couple suppliers might send a piece or a part to, multiple furniture companies. And so it's a huge yeah, it's a huge stepping out that you guys did on behalf of the furniture industry and West Michigan. And so thanks so much for your leadership. It was really cool to see.
We're excited about it.
Thank you very much. One more thing, since this is a group that's focusing on recommendations for policy in the community, any advice in terms of, or things that resonated with Steelcase in terms of the communities where you're located, in terms of policy positions that they had that, you know, were in alignment with your intended directions, or things that maybe otherwise got in the way of allowing you to move in the direction, things that are maybe barriers to be removed?
I mean, I would say one of the barriers is just the cost for investing in renewable energy and the cost for investing in offsets. So to the extent that you can offer, you know, kind of what Don mentioned, almost something like a co-op or some opportunity to take advantage of those at a lower cost, that could be very helpful.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
I thought Dave was fishing for, like, tell me what I need to do to get Steelcase to build a big plant in Holland. I mean, Dave,
that would be very welcome.
If you want me to say it, I'll just say it, and then we'll just see what happens. So
Just text.
You know, it's more temperate here on the lakeshore, so you don't have to worry about those heating and cooling costs as much.
Yeah,
so.
Jim and I would have a shorter commute, so yeah.
Shorter
all for it.
commute.
Oh, think about all those Scope 3 travel emissions, just dropping through.
There you go.
Oh.
Well, I just have a question too. So I'll wait to hear back from you all, but because of my nature, again, we're waiting, and I don't want to get ahead of the curve. So happy to at another time show you that presentation, which is a simple listing, but do want to know when you say go, or we create a list, or give me the next action step you'd like to see so that we can proceed if it makes sense for all of you. Okay.
Great. Thanks, Jim.
And I think, you know, I feel a little disadvantage here without Keith here today, but, you know, my thought is, you know, I'd like to report back to Keith the feelings of this group, which I believe have been very positive towards Jim's approach, and hearing the concept of complementary to the other process, and maybe something that doesn't necessarily need to be time bound to the putting out of the survey, that I'd like to kind of regroup with Keith, and then we can circle back with Jim to map out a plan for execution on that.
Would it be reasonable to get an idea of the questions that, I know that conversations can take winding roads when you're in person, but I think that would be informative, I guess, for us, is to see, like, what are the kind of questions that are on the docket for talking to these folks.
So April 19 is our follow-up. It was a chance for us to kind of circle back and ask questions about the things we heard today.
Yeah.
And I don't want to obligate, you know, necessarily either Jim or Mary Ellen to that unless they're willing to do that. But I think, and that would be first on the agenda. But if Jim otherwise, you know, and he has sort of shared with Keith and with me a little bit of the outline of a presentation that might be part of this listening tour, or, you know, kind of describing it. We can spend a little bit more time with Jim before the 19th and have that available for this kind of discussion to get your input. And Jim, I don't know if you're available on the 19th otherwise to discuss that a little bit more fully as well,
Dave,
in terms of the approach.
Dave, you can answer that. I'm watching your lips. You're about to smile because you're going to say, yes, Jim will be ready. Say that, Dave.
Jim is always ready when we want Jim to be ready. So I'm sure he'll do that.
Guys, you got to have passion.
I'm going to be enthusiastic about it, Jim.
There you go. Was that so hard, David?
Jim, you're welcome anytime. I like you.
Okay, baby. I'm here.
That's fun. Mary Ellen, you too, obviously.
Yeah. This is good. And you're right. It's all about equity, and it's good for the community. It's got
Yeah, there's an initial cost, but it makes so much sense in the long run. Yeah.
Very cool. Well, Mary Ellen, thanks for hanging over with us a little bit and so much for your feedback or for your comments and your leadership. Really appreciate it. And we've got like, I think 1 or 2 small things on the agenda. So you're welcome to hang around, but I didn't want you to feel like you needed to either. Given the time.
But if you can maybe hit the stop sharing real quick and we'll go back to our full screen here. Yeah, so I can see everybody again.
I don't dare touch anything now.
Right, there goes the technology.
Yeah, it'll probably break up the whole meeting.
Yeah,
so
appreciate the
I
opportunity
will try to stop
call
sharing.
you.
Yeah,
Take care.
I need my tech support here.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Maybe Becky can grab it back.
Okay. And I will try to stop sharing somehow here.
Perfect.
Here we
There we
go.
go. And then.
Okay.
All right.
Alrighty.
We've got the
Okay,
agenda.
thank you.
Successful
Bye-bye.
transition. Thank you, Mary Ellen.
That's great. Thanks, Mary Ellen.
Thank you very much.
That's great.
All right. Anybody, anybody want to lift anything up for a hot minute? I know we're not totally debriefing right now, but that was a pretty good window into where the business community is at.
Yeah.
No, that was an excellent update.
There's a ton there with the supply chain. I'm just insider info there. There's a ton there with the supply chain. So
that company is a leader in doing that. And I appreciate that. It's a good model for us.
absolutely. Okay, where am I looking? So we did the Joe thing.
Yeah,
right?
I just gave you an update earlier on that. Yep. I think he'll have a lot more for us on the 19th because we'll have been through hopefully those comparative community one-on-one discussions with their sustainability managers to really be able to draw that profile for that community more effectively. So I think we'll be in really good shape for the 19th for an update from Joe.
Excellent.
Okay. And the meetings moving forward, 19th, May 3rd, May 17th, are we still in like Zoom land, or are we starting to think about non-Zoom land? I'm imagining various people are
I think we're probably, yeah, it's a good question. You know, let us chat with you a little bit more here. I think the city council has begun to meet in person. A lot of the boards are still meeting virtually at this point. And I think, you know, we've done some things in person, still would be social distance, still would be masked, you know, in April. The good news is I think the vaccine of eligibility is getting out there more fully, and we're starting to see more and more of the population. So if not the 19th, hopefully maybe in May. But, you know, if you can indulge me to kind of circle back with Keith, get our thoughts together too, and then engage with you and Travis on how you want to move forward, we'll do that.
All right, so mentally we'll plan on Zoom for the 19th and we'll adjust otherwise at this point.
Yep.
Yep.
I think so.
Good. Yep. Sounds good.
And then the 19th again would have a presentation from Ann on the CNI EWR, and then hopefully Paul Sachs from the county on PACE financing.
Okay.
Possible to have, will Ann have the slides like she has in the past? Would it be possible to look over those ahead of time?
Slides ahead of time. We have generally put that out right afterward, but again, if we have it ahead of time, we can try to do that. It's just a matter of how far along we get by that time frame. I know Ann is already beginning to work on that presentation, so if we can do that now, generally it's nice to have a little bit of context with those
yes,
when you're looking them over. But yeah,
Dave, the Ottawa County has created a groundwater board.
Yes.
To start addressing that. And I was appointed to that as well, because I don't have anything else going on. So
yeah, you're just sort of hanging out.
Paul Sachs is managing that. And that first meeting is the 19th from 2 to 4. So
it's good to know. Okay.
I don't know.
He ought to be able to jump on Zoom right after 4 o'clock then, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'll probably be an hour coming late to this meeting because I'll join that. I don't know if from now on it'll have a different, they were just trying to get the first meeting, and so they've set it up for that. So.
Yeah.
Well, you should just tell them that ours takes priority, Travis. I mean, really.
All right. I was going to say something about solving the climate patterns, maybe solves the groundwater issue.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, that could be.
I don't know. Anyway, so if he's available, we got to check in with him yet, but maybe we'll catch him at the second half of the meeting and be the first part of the meeting. And again, we'll have some information from Joe too. So even if Paul has to move into May 3, I think PACE is an interesting concept. It's one of the things that's in the opportunity matrix.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't spent a lot of time talking about it, but the idea behind it is it provides some financing mechanisms for businesses to make deeper energy improvements.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, as Mary Ellen was talking about today, ROI is a key factor, you know, in a lot of the planning of these businesses. And it's interesting that they put an own internal carbon number on that, which is something I don't think a lot of businesses are doing yet. But maybe more and more will be. That obviously is going to affect the ROI in a way that allows for more projects to get done. But another way that allows for that hurdle to get overcome is if the company's own equity isn't being used and there's some other money that can come into the picture somehow. And that's where that PACE financing comes in. I know, Brian, you're probably familiar with, pretty familiar with that topic as well.
Yeah. The internal cost of carbon is another, it's a little more infantile than science-based targets, but it's not far behind. And it's because like countries like Canada are like naming costs of carbon. So then you've got corporations that have, you know, like buildings in Europe or buildings in Canada that already have like costs of carbon. And so it's like, that's another thing that in 3 or 5 years, even if business owners have never heard of it now, probably in 5 years, they'll all have like real plans around it, whether they know it or want to admit it or not. So it's just, part of this stuff that's just not slowing down because these major employers these OEMs are putting stakes in the ground. So
yep,
it's a big wave for sure. Yeah, and PACE sort of fits inside of like, how do you finance energy projects bucket. So it's a tool. It's a really powerful tool. And there's other ones. And so that'll be a good conversation to learn about for sure. It's 5:17. So I want to be cognizant of time. Does anybody else want to lift up anything from any of the attachments that we have or any other commentary before we break for a few weeks, not just 2, but 3? Okay, cool. Well, I think then Dave, unless I'm missing something, I think that covers it. And
it does. Yep.
Be communicating with Keith then about.
Yes, about next meeting and about a little bit more about this listening tour concept and mapping out what the questions would look like so that by the 19th here, we'd be able to circle back and get your thought process on that being an element of the feedback mechanisms in addition to the surveys.
Yeah. Yep. Good. We'll have Keith, we'll give Keith a test to see if he actually watched this.
He might be watching it live. You never know. It's
YouTube
live right now.
I feel like I would have gotten a text or something.
Yeah, no, I hope he's not. That means he's not really on vacation.
He has a laptop at the beach.
Never know.
That would be appropriate. Okay, cool. Well, meeting adjourned then, everybody. Good to see you all. Enjoy the nice weather.
Yep.
Go out and get vaccinated.
Already done.
Way to go.
Got my number 2 tomorrow.
Working on it.
Right.
I have a bad story related to that, and Scott Corbin's involved, but maybe another time I can tell. What's that?
Is that why he's not here?
No, oh gosh, I hope not. No, we got on a list in Allegan County to get the shots at Wayland High School. And I'm 40, so I don't know how we got on this list, but we got on it. We go there and I'm not named, like I got like verification emails and all this stuff. And me and like 8 other people when the 9 a.m. slot got pulled aside And they're like, hey, there was like a rogue link that went out and it wasn't supposed to, and you signed up but you're not on our list, so we don't have a vaccine for you. And they had probably north of 100 people that had signed up and driven to Wayland to get vaccinated. And it was like a rogue thing, that a technology issue. And the reason why I bring Scott up is because Scott was there as whatever his job is in Allen. He was there. So I was like, hey, Scott, how are you? And then he's like, oh, how you doing, Brian? And then I was like, well, I'm leaving. I didn't get a shot. So anyway, but people were literally yelling at the nurses because their name wasn't on the list.
Yeah.
I was like, I yelled back at someone for yelling at the nurses. So it was an interesting Saturday.
A lot of dynamics